I'm male 32, have a 4-year-old daughter. Let's call her Gracie. Gracie is half black, her mother, female 31, being African American. Overall, her mother handled all of Gracie's hair care and taught me how to do simple styles, but even those simple styles were difficult. My wife went on vacation with her friends to celebrate her friend's birthday, and my mother came over to visit. I hadn't done Gracie's hair in a few days, so it became nappy and unmanageable. When I tried to comb her hair, the comb broke. My mother said I should get my daughter a perm so her hair would be more manageable, so I took her to a salon and permed it. My wife got home, and when she saw her daughter, she was livid. First she screamed at me, and then at my mother for even suggesting that. But I think she's overreacting because it's just hair. Then she brought up our wedding. My mother had tried to get my wife to straighten her hair for the wedding, but my wife refused because she wanted her natural hair on her wedding day to be as natural as possible. My mother often comments on my wife's and daughter's hair, and I agree with my mother. But now my wife's telling me that perms chemically burn and damage hair to change the texture, and that I damaged our daughter's hair. So now she's thinking of getting our daughter's hair cut so her hair can heal from the damages. But I still think she's overreacting. Besides, I don't want my daughter's hair cut. She looks so cute now. Am I the idiot for straightening my daughter's hair without my wife's permission, even though Gracie is my daughter too? Your daughter is half black. You are married to a black person, and you use the words nappy and unmanageable? Besides that, you sound like you haven't learned how to care for your daughter's hair, nor tried to learn how to care for curly, coily hair. Not to mention, it sounds like you haven't learned to respect your wife's boundaries. You are the idiot. Go watch a couple of videos on curly hair and stop listening to your mom. No black person would straighten their child's hair at such a young age. It's just not done. And for your info, hair just isn't hair in the black community. Furthermore, you knew your wife was against straightening your daughter's hair. Did you ever ask her why? You were wrong. Educate yourself, and then apologize to your wife and daughter. You are the idiot, a huge one in fact, doing a perm on a toddler? Are you out of your mind? It chemically burns hair and can even damage the scalp through chemicals, especially at such a young age. Such a procedure should not be done on kids. On top of that, you just did that out of your convenience, without asking your wife, and maybe even daughter herself, because you were too lazy to learn how to comb kinky hair properly. This being said, your mom gave you a terrible recommendation. She risked damage to your 4-year-old granddaughter out of her hate for hair structure. I'm sure she knew what she was doing. No way does an older woman not have any idea how a perm works. Seriously, OP, when you get married, you're supposed to care more for your wife than your mother. I think you'll end up divorced because your wife realizes that you care more about pleasing your mother than your marriage and child. You're calling your wife and daughter ugly. It would be best if you realized that. Instead, you said cute now, which means you thought she was ugly before. You are the idiot. Update. Am I the idiot for straightening my daughter's hair without my wife's permission? I've read the comments and came to a realization about my marriage and my wife, and now I feel horrible. My wife's mentioned in passing about her childhood and was always vague about it, but after overhearing a conversation between her and my mother-in-law, I just realized how much I truly messed up. My wife is dark-skinned and tall, and she got bullied for that along with her hair. My wife is beautiful and so is my daughter, and their hair isn't a problem. I'm the problem and so is my mother. After hearing my wife's conversations about my mother and me, I realized that my mother's a bully and I'm just a drone and a follower. My mother constantly picked on my wife, and I just stood by and blindly agreed because she's my mom. But that woman I married is my wife, and I should have protected her from my ignorance and my mother's ignorance. She'd always make sure my daughter didn't play outside when she'd go over to her house because she didn't want her to be darker like her mother. And that comment made me uncomfortable, but I took it as a weird joke. So I'm cutting my mother off, and I'm going to apologize to my wife and daughter and start watching hair tutorials again. Final update. Am I the idiot for straightening my daughter's hair without my wife's permission? I just got off the phone with my mother. My wife listened in on the phone call. I didn't realize she was in the living room with me until she put her hand on my shoulder during the call. My mother is, well, livid. She freaked out on me and threatened to call CPS when I told her I didn't want her coming around my wife and daughter. and she refused to understand what we did wrong. Then I mentioned the damage that the perm could cause to my daughter, and my mother said my wife was a drama queen. When I told her my daughter might need a haircut behind this, she flipped out and said, "I won't let my granddaughter look like a freak." And I was mortified. She said she would take my daughter from my wife and me and raise her the way God intended. That caused a screaming match. My wife put her hand on my shoulder in the midst of it, took the phone from me, and told my mother if she comes to her home again, the police will be called, and then she hung up. My wife is still mad at me, rightfully so, but she told me she isn't leaving me over this. My father called a few moments ago, but I ignored the call. I'll talk to him in the morning about this. My wife and I arranged for our daughter to spend the night at her mother's house, and couples therapy will be in the near future. My mother has called the house multiple times from my sister's phone. My sister is 25 and lives for drama, so now the whole family on my mother's side is blowing up my phone with many mixed opinions, most of which are horrible. It's funny. The only family member whose opinion reflects this section's common consensus is the one who was disowned a few months ago. Well, actually, that's not funny. Instead, it shows how messed up my family is. So glad to see your edits that you've realized your ignorance. I found it funny when your mom said she'd call CPS, when the only CPS-worthy thing here is the perm job. Weirdly, it does sound like your mom does love your daughter. I hope one day that love can eventually overcome her hatred. OP, thank you for giving me the hope that people can still learn from and try to make up for their mistakes. I mean, you were the idiot, but I think seeing just how much of an idiot you were was the wake-up call you needed. You've made great progress in a short time. Continue to put your daughter and wife first, and hopefully we won't have more stories from you in the future. This was a roller coaster. Yes, you were so wrong, but you've already heard it all, so I'm just going to say good on you for realizing how terribly wrong you were, and I hope you commit to change. Stick to it. Never stop learning. I, 25 male, have a good relationship with my family, and my father is a wealthy tycoon. I got married to my wife, 25, 2 years ago, but before I did, my father had me sign a prenup, which was not in any way disadvantageous to my wife. She gets 1/5 of my estate, currently in a trust account that I too don't have access to, in the event of a divorce after the age of 30, and enough money at its present value to buy a sports car each year for her next 3 lifetimes without going broke. So my wife and I both signed it because it didn't pose any problems. However, one of the clauses was that my estate or I couldn't be used to repay her student loan. My father offered my wife a role in the business with great benefits and a great salary, which is multiples of what anyone else in the same market position would offer. However, my wife turned this down. Instead, she agreed with my father that he would fund, with no strings attached, the startup business that she's passionate about and in the field she went to college to study. This would give her autonomy, as well as the satisfaction to do what she likes. However, 2 years later, the business is not as successful as she'd hoped. Regular startup complications. It takes time in her field to get recognition and gain market share before the larger revenues start coming in. Due to this, she has become delinquent on her loans and has fallen behind. She's fully committed and passionate about her work, but sometimes it just doesn't show returns. She has asked me to pay off her loan, or at least supplement the payments she's making to reach her required payment amounts. I've reminded her about the prenup and how I cannot assist in this matter, and how doing so would cause a rift with my father if he ever got to know, as I am directly disobeying his conditions. His business currently employs me, and you can call me a 25-year-old big baby, as I drive my own car gifted by him, live in a house owned by him, and my current remuneration is in his hands. One misstep, and I jeopardize everything with him, because previous instances show you do not want to get on his wrong side. Yes, I understand I've been too comfortable and was brought into this world with a silver spoon in my mouth. If it helps, my father doesn't want me or anyone else to help pay for the loan because he is a loan committee member. He also wants her to understand the value of money and have her pay for the loan through her own means. He also had his legal team and tax advisors explain how paying for the loan would cause problems, but I understood none of that. I am stuck between helping my wife or keeping a promise to my father. Your dad seems like he likes a power trip. There's a difference between looking out for or looking after your own versus controlling them and the whole world in which they operate. Your wife is not a child and is also not his child. Why is he trying to teach her the value of money? It's all about control. I go, everyone's the idiot here. Both you and your wife went into this situation fully knowing the deal, and both have happily benefited dramatically from your father's finances. I respect your wife for taking the risk and wanting to try something herself, but she still willingly accepted a deal with the devil. As I said, you literally could help each other out, but are not, and hiding behind a prenup. Not the idiot. Your wife signed the prenup of her own free will and knew the terms of it. On the plus side for her, if she falls behind and ruins her credit and possibly her employment opportunities, she can divorce you after she's 30, and voila, pay it and everything off and never work again. That's what I'd be thinking right about now. You should probably go talk to your dad, because the clause designed to protect his assets is now possibly going to hurt your marriage. You are the idiot. Stop using daddy's money for everything, and he will no longer be able to control you. Stand up for yourself and your wife. The best thing you could do is cut yourself off from him and be independent. Then you don't have to worry about what he thinks or says. He is not your wife's parent, and you are both grown adults. So act like it, and maybe he'd respect you. The only power he has is money. Show him you don't need it. Throwaway, me, 26 male, and my girlfriend, Bella, 24, have been together for 2 years. A bit of background. When Bella turned 5 years old, her parents got her a kitten named Chunky. Bella instantly fell in love with Chunky, and they became best friends. Unfortunately, Chunky ended up passing away at the age of 10, and Bella was heartbroken. I never met Chunky, but Bella talks about him frequently and even has a dedicated photo album. The main issue. Recently, my older brother, 29, passed away. I'm still trying to process everything, and my whole family is devastated. My brother's funeral took place yesterday. Bella came with me for emotional support and to offer her condolences. As you can imagine, I've been an emotional mess these past few weeks. Well, after the funeral, Bella came over to my apartment so I wouldn't be alone. After sitting together for a while, Bella hugged me and said, "I'm so sorry this happened. I know exactly how you feel. When Chucky died, I didn't know how to move on. I don't know what came over me, but I snapped at her. I yelled, 'Are you kidding me? Don't you ever act like you know how I feel. You lost a stupid house pet. I lost my flesh and blood.' Ever since that moment, Bella has been very distant, and I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh on her. Am I the idiot? Everyone's the idiot here. I don't think she was comparing your brother to her cat, more the emotions connected to the deaths. She had to grieve and mourn the loss and go through those emotions, and you are going through them now. I think her saying, 'When Chunky died, I just didn't know how to move on,' wasn't her saying, 'Ha ha, my cat and your brother are the same.' To be honest, I'd be distant with you too. It didn't seem malicious on her part. You are the idiot. You lost your cool because you're having strong emotions, which is understandable. But I don't think she was equating your brother to a cat. She was comparing the most significant grief she's felt so far to the most significant grief you've probably felt so far. Of course, she can't relate perfectly because she's not you. If she loses a sibling-type person one day, she may agree that that is worse. But until then, remember that no one wins the suffering Olympics. Not the idiot. I kinda can't believe all these responses. Yes, she was trying to relate, but OMG, that was such an offensive statement to make. She may not have intended to be the idiot, but in saying she knew exactly how you felt, she completely minimized your grief. Now that said, if you want to maintain the relationship, it might be worth apologizing for snapping, which was not kind, even if I would call it justified. Let her know that what she said hurt you and made you feel like she was downplaying the significance of your brother's death. My husband, Kevin, 31, and I, female 27, welcomed our first baby a week ago. Kevin is the type of person that gets stressed out easily and reacts to events negatively. We've had conversations about his ability to handle being in the delivery room. I said if he couldn't be there, it was fine seeing how he reacts under pressure and can have mom there instead. He said he could 100% handle anything and promised to be supportive and positive. I went into labor alone. He met me at the hospital. When he entered the delivery room, he looked so stressed and overwhelmed already. He started moving around periodically, completely ignoring me. He got more visibly stressed when my pain got intense. He took my hand when I started having contractions and kept clutching it, almost stopping blood circulation. My entire arm went numb. I felt strange, and although I was in intense pain, I saw his face. It was so red, and a visible vein in his forehead looked like it was about to blow up. It was not helpful at all. In fact, it was frustrating and affected my emotions negatively. But still, I was willing to suck it up. Then he started crying, like literally sobbing really loud. This sent me into full panic mode. I found myself screaming, telling him to stop several times, and as a result, he literally yelled back in my ear. Finally, the nurse got involved. I told her to get him out of there. He tried to argue with me but wasn't given a chance and was pressured to leave the room. I didn't see him after our daughter was born, and while I was resting, he didn't show up. His mom kept calling to see where he was. She stayed with me, and I hadn't seen him till the day I was discharged. We had a big fight at home. He kept lashing out when I said how bad it was for him to ghost me when I needed him. He said I shouldn't expect him to stick around after I cruelly and selfishly kicked him out of the room and robbed him of an opportunity to see our daughter's first breath. I explained he was causing me to panic with how he was crying. Still, he accused me of making up excuses, and I was purely at fault for kicking him out and getting the staff to gang up on him, no matter how hard I tried to spin it. He said as a dad, he should have the liberty to be in the room no matter how he behaves and whether I like it or not. I got tired of arguing. I told him to stop, and he said he will, but would never forget what I've cost him that day, then walked out. I was so mad and took time to cool off. Then when I unpacked my bag, I found a small box that contained a necklace with our daughter's name. I felt awful knowing Kevin left it for me to wear at the hospital, but the argument happened, and he spent the entire time in the car, in the hospital's parking lot. Not the idiot. He said as a dad he should have the liberty to be in the room, no matter how he behaves and whether I like it or not. I laughed at this because it's so wrong and entitled. So forgive me for laughing, it's not funny. But wow, that is balls to the wall delusional. Double wow. Not only did you not need him, but he was also upsetting you. That is the opposite of fulfilling your needs. In the end, who is in the delivery room is up to you. I imagine this is usually based on who you think will be the most helpful and/or supportive. He was neither, quite the opposite. Agree. Why can't people process that birth isn't about how fun it is to spectate and cut the umbilical cord? It's about supporting the person who is having a living person violently exit them. The baby isn't going anywhere. There's time to hang out and bond later. If you aren't there to focus on helping, you've got no business being there during labor. It doesn't matter who you are. Wow, wow, wow. So, not the idiot. I would have done exactly the same thing. I started to have a panic attack too when I gave birth, and my husband and midwife calmed me down first before I pushed. Otherwise, I would be pushing for nothing, and it could be dangerous for my baby and me. No matter how he behaves, is he crazy? It was a delivery room. For God's sake, I'm surprised the nurse didn't get him out herself. His behavior after the birth is what's concerning. You rightfully tossed him out of the moment, and then he takes off to the point where his own mother doesn't know where he is? No, that is not okay. Kevin needs therapy ASAP. He is right to be angry, but his anger is misdirected. It should be aimed at himself because he failed big time. If he can't admit this and apologize to you, I don't see how the two of you can remain married.